The life of a soldier in the 1860s was a tough one, and for the thousands of young Americans who left home to fight for the cause, it was an experience none of them would ever forget. Whether you were fighting for the North, which was the Union, or the South, which was the Confederacy, Civil War camp life was hard. They spent many months, even years away from home without loved ones, doing long hours of drill with inadequate food, shelter, disease, and boredom. There was bad food, poor living conditions, sickness, diseases, war wounds, and death to deal with. The soldiers in camps were certainly not eating their mother's home-cooked meals. They had to get camp rations like hardtack. The daily allowance of food issued to soldiers was called rations. Everything was given out uncooked, so the soldiers were left up to their own ingenuity to prepare their meals. Small groups would often gather together to cook and share rations, and they called the group a mess, referring to each other as messmates. The soldiers' diet was very simple: meat, coffee, sugar, and a biscuit called hardtack. Sometimes the food was infested with small bugs the soldiers called weevils, so they referred the hardtack as worm castles because of the many holes bored through the crackers. Meats were salted or smoked, while other items such as fruits and vegetables were dried or canned, if they were available at all. They did not understand proper nutrition, so often there was lack of certain foods necessary for good health. The Union called hardtack Union hardtack. The Confederates called it Confederate Johnny cakes. They also ate salt pork, beans, coffee, and cornbread. When they were in the field, it would be hard to get a proper ration or fresh water. Most of the time, while on the field or during drills, men would be hungry and sometimes be starving. Alcohol was not allowed in camp except for medical purposes, but sometimes soldiers would sneak alcohol into their tents. For example, once someone used a hollowed watermelon, filled it with whiskey, put straws inside. They buried it and drank from the straws sticking out of the ground. The Civil War food wasn't that great, but they had to eat or else they would starve. The Civil War living conditions were cramped for most people. In the Sibley tent, which each tent was designed to hold 12 men but often held 20, which made their quarters very cramped. Some soldiers slept in dog tents, which were a rectangular piece of canvas buttoned to another piece of canvas which held 2 men. If poles were not available, soldiers would sometimes use their weapons to hold up their tents. Many Confederates didn't receive shelter tents at all, though some were issued a variation of the tent which they pitched to as a lean-to or a shelter. The troops pitched their tents in a formation similar to their order of rank, possibly so when attacked, the higher-ranking officers would be protected. Camp life was boring most of the time, so soldiers would do activities to pass the time. Leisure activities included journaling, writing letters, playing cards, dominoes, or other games, gambling, drinking, and sometimes fist fighting with each other. When they were off duty, soldiers would purchase items from the sutler stores such as toiletries, canned fruit, pocket knives, and other items at high prices. Sutler stores were run by civilians with permission to operate near military camps. A private's salary was only $13 a month. Often, most of their salary would go to the sutler. Civil War camp life was much different than life today. Sickness and disease killed more men than in battles. Sanitation in all camps was very poor. Nobody knew about germs due to the existence of bacteria. Whiskey was given for most ailments. It was an elixir called Blue Mass, which was a stimulant, and today might be the equivalent of Red Bull. Thousands of men died in the Civil War in both armies without firing a single shot because of injuries, amputations, and the unsanitary conditions. Some of the great men in the Civil War were Ulysses S. Grant, Robert E. Lee, Abraham Lincoln, and Jefferson Davis. Ulysses S. Grant was the leader of the Union Army. Robert E. Lee was the great leader of the Confederate Army. Abraham Lincoln was the president for the North. Jefferson Davis was the president for the South. In the Civil War, whether it was camp life or war, the Civil War was difficult for everyone. The Civil War was one of the bloodiest battles in America's history, from the Revolutionary War to World War II. Whether you were Union or Confederate, camp life, Civil War camp life was hard.